I'm Phil Sponenberg, and we're going to go ahead and talk about Spanish goats, specifically lessons that we can learn from other breeds, both here in the United States as well as internationally. There's some important issues here, and the idea is for you to take away some appreciation for the importance of conserving the Spanish goat, what it has to offer, and how we can move forward. Start with a few questions. These are not questions from you. These are questions that I have, basically, and then we'll move on to the experiences, and then we'll move on to some conclusions. Big issue is that, everybody thinks my goat's better than your goat, and you have to figure out why that is, what it is that you're looking for in a goat that makes one goat better than another goat. So which goat is best? Big and dead, small and alive? Probably small and alive. And it takes a pretty good single kid to make up for pretty average twins. So fertility is important, and basically how long should a doe last? I raise goats. I've had some does kind of give out at 4. I've had some goats give out at 15 to 17 years old. So that becomes an important issue, especially when you're talking about replacing goats and retaining the next generation into the herd. How do we get there? How do we avoid the mistakes of others? Because there have been some mistakes, and we really have to appreciate that to move forward and to make sure that we don't make the same mistakes others have as we try to conserve these Spanish goats. Goals, legitimate goals, big growthy goats. Yeah, we all want goats that are born, grow fast, and get big. Survivors. Now it gets a little more complicated. Obviously, they have to survive our management style, our environment, what we're doing with them. Good mothers. Yeah, we want good mothers because we want them to raise the kids well. And low input. Now, this is going to be real different for some people. Some people very much favor a low input system. Some people are willing to put quite a bit of grain and medications and other inputs into the goats, and that really fitting the system to the goat makes a huge difference and is extremely important. Some experiences. Chivo Neoquino is a goat breed from the south of Argentina and Patagonia. It's a dry, arid environment that really periodically goes to pot. Goats roam over big areas. They grow a lot of cashmere. And so there's actually cooperatives that help to organize the local Mapuche community into producing textiles, exquisite textiles, such as the poncho in this picture. So they're cashmere producers, but they have a Spanish background. Now, the trick is, in a good year in this region, Angora goats are much more profitable than the Chivo Neoquino. But in a bad year, so volcanic ash from Chile, so all the volcanoes tend to be in Chile, the wind blows from west to east, so all the ash gets deposited over in Patagonia. So in a bad year, volcanic ash from Chile, and it can be several inches thick. The Angoras die because their teeth wear out. Not all of them, but most of them. The Chivos Neoquinos produce at normal rates. And so basically there's very little impact of the ash fall on the Chivo Neoquino. And that's important because they survive, they're still productive. So most producers keep herds of pure Chivo Neoquino as an insurance against those bad years. So they'll be perfectly happy to raise Angora goats, but they know that when a bad year hits, they need the Chivo Neoquino to have any prospect of survival of their ranching enterprise. Similarly, in the Creole Formosenia, which is from northern Argentina, it's a dry scrubland, so there's actually quite a bit of vegetation. Boer goats, they tried boer goats. The boer goats are targeted by the predators. That white body with that red head is just an invitation to jaguars and pumas to come get them. Now, the Spanish goats, especially with these moon spots, they basically blend into the environment. And so they actually survive because the predators don't see them. And so another example of the right goat, in this case, a Spanish goat, with some sort of advantage in a specific environment. They're smaller than boer goats, but they're more likely to survive. Gets back to the question of, what do you want? A big dead goat or a small live goat? You want a small live goat. The Creole Mixteca Pastoreña is a Mexican goat from a very arid climate. They're all white. I had a question this week on whether Spanish goats come in white, and yes, they do. And here's a bunch of them. These are really productive survivors. They survive in this arid environment. They are productive. And all these issues become important. So what they did was they imported, one rancher imported this imported billy goat, boar goat, and he's at home. The reason he's at home is so that he can make the does, but he's also at home because he has weak feet. He can't take it out there on that range surviving. So it's basically, if he puts out on the range, it's the wrong breed in the wrong environment for the wrong goal. Now, the DNA results also are important. And in this case, the Cabra Pastoreña, if you look at these structures, you have to learn how to read these, but basically, if there's only 3 different kinds of goats, the 3 different colors represent those 3 different kinds of goats. And you can see here that this local Mexican Spanish type goat actually separates out quite early and maintains a very, very separate identity amongst the other breeds, including 2 Spanish breeds, 3 Spanish breeds, excuse me, and the Anglo-Nubian. And that's important. Now, this one also is, of course, going to split out early and stay that way because it is so distinct from anything that's Spanish. So genetics prove it. A few other species, few other examples on survival and adaptation. Domara sheep, large flocks in South Africa, and it's this lunar landscape. These are thistles that are completely inedible. If they do eat them, they're toxic and they die. So kind of a lunar landscape here. Clearly survivors. Now, this gets to be another issue. Historically, these were in large flocks. So my friend there in South Africa has a flock of 2,500 to 3,000 of these. So basically, multi-sire, but there is a registry. Now, the registry demands pedigrees, but the system on which they were developed didn't demand pedigrees, large flocks and multi-sire. So so basically you got a large flock situation, pedigree breeding situation, and which system is going to most tailor this genetic resource for this difficult environment? Single sire, multi-sire, let's fight about it. And so that's what's happening here. These rams are going after it. The winner is going to actually mate most of those ewes and produce most of those lambs. And in this environment, for these production goals, that's probably a worthwhile endeavor. They need that sort of competition to hone this genetic resource. And this is survival in a tough environment, much like the Spanish goat survives. This is an important question. Cattle, other examples. Is bigger always better? Agropecuaria Forestal in Venezuela had 40,000 cows, at least before it was nationalized. Now, this ranch had many, many years of standard selection for growth rate. Bigger is better. The quicker you get there, the best yet. So what happened was a light bulb went off in their thinking. They began to select for cow fertility and cow longevity. So any cow that fails to wean a calf gets an X brand on her back. No cow gets 2 brands. So on the other side of these animals, there's actually a number brand, and these don't have any X brands on their tops. But no cow is allowed 2 X's. Most of the cattle are the zebu type cattle. And the result, cow weight went down. Well, they were selecting for fertility. Calf weight went down, but the total weight of the calves sold went up, and it went up considerably. So the whole profitability of the exercise went up. A little bit counterintuitive. The smaller animals that were more reproductively sound actually produced better than the larger animals, which were less reproductively sound. Also, after several years of selection, geared towards fertility, each cow, different herds, each herd has several teenaged cows annually producing and weaning calves in this really, really challenging environment. And this is in herds of American Brahman, Nalori, and Gusarak cattle, along with Romo Sinoano, which are Criollo Spanish and therefore more expected to do this trick. But a teenaged American Brahman cow, that's pretty amazing. Teenage Nalori, that's pretty amazing, especially in this environment. So this selection, only geared towards fertility, ended up basically forming this genetic resource in a very, very useful way. Producer wins twice with fertility and longevity. More young animals to sell and less need for replacements. The longer those cows survive, the longer your nannies survive, the less you have to replace them. Texas example, we used to raise Texas Longhorn cattle. I know many of you listening to this are probably Texans, but we compared in South Texas, we compared, basically Hereford Brahman Angus crosses with a Longhorn Angus cross with a Longhorn purebred. So you can go to the different birth weights, weaning weights, value of the calf at weaning, because the Longhorns are going to take a hit, annual replacement cost per animal, the weight of the mature cows, the stocking rate that's implied from that, calving interval, that's going to be different for these two different genetic resources. They matured about the same rate. Cow longevity is going to be quite different. The Texas Longhorn is going to live to be 15 years. Conception rate, and then basically the value of the bulls. So what's going to happen is when you run the whole model for this ranch, if you use the crossbred animals and breed them to an Angus bull, you're going to end up with about $43,000 per year. If you use Longhorn Angus and Longhorn, you have to combine this because you have to have a purebred source for these Longhorn Angus crosses. You're actually going to end up more profitability because of that longevity of the Longhorn cows and the fact that they have a shorter calving interval. So you're actually going to win twice, and you actually win by quite a bit. That's repeated throughout the Americas. In the Patagonia, they compare Herefords with the local Creole or Spanish breed. Cow size is different. The weaning weight, look at that. Weaning weight, 50% for Herefords, 85% for Criollos. Longevity, this is because their teeth wear out. 15 years for the Criollo. This cow is actually 22 years old. Dystocia, 10%, 1 out of 5,000. That's pretty amazing. Annual replacement. I think this is really where your cost gets buried. You don't really think about this, but this is extremely important. So the market prefers Herefords. The Criollos are going to take a hit at the market. The environment clearly prefers the Criollo. So the breeders surmount the discount against the Criollo by the overall high level of productivity and adaptation. They simply have more to sell. Even if it sells at a lower rate, they're going to be fine. Criollo Salvadoreño, this is a Bolivian dairy cow. Producers want about 25% of this breeding. They all love these cows. They're docile, they produce well, they're disease resistant. Nobody wants the purebreds. This is a real problem. So basically, over years, the opportunities to get that 25% in there diminish because they're going to use it up. You really need to think closely about that with Spanish goats. Everybody loses in the end. This is the state herd. The state maintains a 200 cow herd to provide the bulls that the private dairy farmers need for crossbreeding. Setting goals is extremely important. Adaptation and production. These are two different baskets, and the animals actually spend metabolic resources to put their resources into one of these. Adaptation, this is an African Nguni bull, survived this environment, survived leopards. Yeah, that's a survivor. This is a Belgian blue and white production, growth rate, have a vet out to do a C-section to get the thing born in the first place. Massively productive, but poorly adapted. Can we have both? Yeah, but only to a degree. The challenge is you have to save well-adapted, productive females especially. And the important detail is the genetics behind adaptation is very, very tricky. That means heritability is low. Adaptation responds only slowly to selection. The good news is the genetics behind production, growth, conformation, that's really simple. Heritability is pretty high. These traits respond quickly to selection. The final lesson, you can rapidly select an adapted bloodline or a breed for enhanced production levels. You cannot make rapid progress for selecting for adaptation in a highly productive but a non-adapted breed. So we have to choose our goals very, very carefully. And if we have an adapted breed, and the Spanish goat is an adapted breed, that means keep it pure. And this is where breeder honesty and integrity come in. Keep it pure, keep it productive, and you can do that. You're going to have much more success with that than if you resort to the very, very fast, simple resort to crossbreeding to larger breeds to get that size up that you all love so much. And I love them too, but you need to really, really protect that adapted core. So while wins in the show ring, rarely wins in the field, and that is extremely important. That is been proven repeatedly in nearly all species. And so basically in some sheep breeds, especially the show sheep and the field sheep, you can barely confuse them with one another. So think about that as you're selecting your goats. Think about that when you're buying goats. Think about that with auction results and things like that. Challenges: document and value field performance. Avoid the selection for extremes in a show ring or even extremes in production. These are some adapted Spanish goats from the lowland area of South Carolina. This one, yeah, selection went extreme. The longer ears, the better, the bigger the goat, better. Now the guy's small, but this goat's huge. This goat, lives in a palace, basically get fed everything you want, and then here the show ring loves extremes. You pick your extreme size, horn growth, whatever. In this breed, they selected them for ears. Pick something, select for it. Yeah, you can do it. Every time you do that, you diminish the opportunity to select for adaptation, and that can end up with a real problem. We're going to stop the share there, and we're going to end this.